Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So this class is dedicated to, for one, happy birthday to Philip Namworth, our dear friend, on January 11th, as well as in honor of Yonina Chaya Law Niwais Bat Shlomo Moshe. Class titled, Have You Lost Your Voice or Never Found It? And this does not mean like losing your voice to laryngitis or hoarseness. Obviously, we're talking here about, for that you'd need a different address. I don't really deal with those type of things. Here we're talking about losing your real voice, your inner voice, your uniqueness. And on one hand, it seems so simple that every one of us is a unique individual with many elements that are completely different than everyone else, as the Talmud says, that no two people think alike, just like no two faces are alike. So of the billions and billions and maybe trillions of people that have lived from the beginning of time, there have never been two exact faces. Even identical twins are not exact. And just like there have been two exact faces, as the Talmud says, a few thousand years ago the Talmud wrote that, and nothing's changed in the last 2,000 years as far as that statement goes. So too it says, Ein day same, no two minds are alike. This doesn't mean we don't have commonalities and similarities, but that which makes us unique is absolutely unique. So you can even say even male and female have more in common on a DNA level than what differentiates them. But that which differentiates them is unique. That's all that matters, the uniqueness. So on one hand, it's very clear that every person is unique. And yet, we live in a world of conformity and a world of compliance and fear, where most people simply do not find their unique voice and don't find the courage to be able to live up to it. Whether it's due to peer pressure, social pressure, whether it's due to growing up in a home where we may have been silenced and our voice was not allowed to mature and emerge. But purely on paper, not getting now into the emotional, psychological implications of it, it seems so bizarre, even worse than bizarre, like so absolutely something wrong, that every person should just be able to say, embrace, I have my uniqueness, and I'm secure and confident with it, and that does not make me a freak or odd. At the same time, I respect and embrace someone else's uniqueness, and together let's play music. And yet, this simple truism, this simple statement I just made, is so elusive to most of us, and is really the basis of almost all our problems of lack of coexistence, jealousy, envy, war, people competing for the same thing, that if you may have taken away something of me, how could someone take something away from you if what you have is uniquely yours? The focus on materialism as being a force of its own. So in other words, your self-worth is defined by your net worth. So the distortions of perception of identity and self-esteem and so on, based on all kinds of superficial and non-essential things. So I could end the class right there with this last one paragraph that I just said. The problem is that even though on paper it sounds so simple, it just continues to be this most difficult thing to find, is that sense of self-confidence and just calm and peace with yourself. Now, when we're younger, we may not appreciate it as much, but as we get older, you appreciate what would you pay, what would you give to just have inner peace. And I don't mean inner peace as opposed to like some people think peace is absence of war. I'm not talking about that. Just like love is not absence of hate. The only thing that happens is when, as we lower our standards and the bar lowers, suddenly for us, a good day means it wasn't a bad day. when the truth is good and peace and love are entities of their own. They're not just the absence of the opposite. So that type of inner peace, or there's some called peace at the center, to just be yourself, be comfortable in your own skin, and not have to feel that someone else is who you should be, or feel that you need to please or satisfy someone else. As simple as it is, as I said, on paper and in concept, in theory, that's how complex it is in actuality. So it's an excellent discussion of figuring out how can such dissonance exist when everybody you speak to resonates that you have something unique about you, and yet you can't live up to it. So of course the immediate answer is, because things that are intellectually true don't necessarily mean they're emotionally comfortable. We can know a lot of truths that simply emotionally we just can't handle for some reason or other. Because when you get down to emotions, we turn into children, and sometimes irrational children. So someone may tell you there's nothing to fear, but you fear it anyway. It doesn't matter how many times you'll be told not to be foolish or childish, that's what you'll revert to. So in essence, really, you can argue is that finding any inner peace, finding yourself, for that matter, really comes down to trying to resolve this schism, this dissonance I've just mentioned, between understanding that you may have uniqueness, or understanding that you actually do, and actually feeling it and acting on it, which is, as I said, far more complicated, far more difficult. The appropriate topic, because this Shabbat, this Shabbos, called Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song. So song always elicits, everybody's mentioned the word song. It's one of those words that usually does not bring a frown to your face, maybe a smile even. Song, music, even just thinking about it, let alone listening to it, has some effect on us that is very unique. Some poets compare it to water. Like, submerging yourself in water. I'm not talking about the polar bears that submerge in this weather in the Brighton Beach or other Coney Island. I'm talking about a nice warm water where you feel completely comfortable and surrounded. There's that certain peace you have when you go into underwater. Even for a few moments, like everything shuts off and you feel nurtured, you feel engulfed, you feel completely protected. And it shouldn't surprise us all, because for 9 months where we spent. The embryonic fluids are like water. They say the closest thing to children's sounds that they hear is the sound of water, because they hear the rush of inside the mother's womb. That's the sound they hear. It's water-like, and it's actually physically that way. The child does not breathe on its own. It'd be hard to breathe inside there. So everything is submerged. In the midrashic state, in the literature, it talks about the creation of the existence, the world. It also says the world was first created and covered completely in waters, and that's why you have the second day in the Bible, in Genesis, that talks about the separation of the higher waters and the lower waters. So land emerged. So the world did not have land initially; everything was covered in water. So it's like similar to the microcosm. In the Jewish thought, everything is microcosm, macrocosm. We human beings are a microcosm of all of existence, which is being increasingly evidenced in science, that everything out there is in here. In a microcosmic level, the parallels are fascinating. And one of them is this, that we begin our lives submerged in water, and so did existence. And then there was some split. So understanding that is critical in understanding ourselves, because that's where we began. And that's why, going back to song has that. And it's interesting, this week's chapter, the song isn't just a song, it's a song, Shiras Hayam, it's a song of water, it's called. It was a song that the Jewish people, Moses, led by Moses, sang after the waters parted, and they were able to walk through and escape the pursuing Egyptians, who ended up being drowned there. This episode has been immortalized in Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments, with all the gizmos and all the tricks of how he pulled off the parting of the sea. Some say it was more difficult for him to do it than for God to do it in the original. Charlton Heston, Moses. I don't know. When you study the real Moses, you're somewhat disappointed when you see his act. But regardless, the point is that this story has been immortalized and it has tremendous lessons, even though for some of us it sounds like so crazy. But song and water, those are the two key operative words. And they relate to each other. As I said, when you listen to music, what do you feel? You feel surrounded by the music, not that you surround the music. You plug out, you unplug, you put the headset on, and suddenly music encompasses, engulfs you, and you're lifted by it. And these are feelings we all relate to. For some it's escapism, perhaps. As they say, some sing to forget, and some sing to remember. Or the line is, some dance to forget, or some dance to remember. But regardless, song has the power to transport you to another time and place. You can elicit tears, joy. It can bring you literally to a place that's another place. And I've shared this, and my theory is that music today has so captivated the young generation. Music is a major force in our society, which is unprecedented. It wasn't a force in society. I mean, there were always musicians and classics, but did not have the masses. To go to a concert 200-300 years ago was for the elite, for the monarchs. It wasn't a mass cultural phenomenon. So obviously technology has part to say about that, but I think it's also more than that. The music has essentially replaced, I submit here, prayer, religion. A musical concert, a rock concert, is like a prayer service, a cathedral. Obviously not with quite the same implications. Though I personally never attended, but I always hear from, they call deadheads, the Grateful Dead fans, that going to a concert was a pilgrimage. Someone once even told me it was like going to the temple, and you prepared for weeks ahead, if not months ahead. And you didn't just prepare physically yourself, you also prepared all the right offerings and incense and ketores and korbanos, all that necessary, all the what some call foreign substances. And it was a whole experience. And in a sense, once upon a time, what religion did for so many people, this is what music does for so many. And it's not a surprise that music is identified with the word soul. Soul. Because that's exactly what spirituality is all about. It's about being lifted to another place, transported to another place, being surrounded by it, and literally freeing yourself from the bounds and from the confines of this material world. And music has the ability to do that, at least temporarily. The great challenge is, can you come back to tell about it? Is it pure escape, or can you integrate it into your daily routines? And that's obviously the key challenge, because it's one thing, to find yourself a weekend, an evening, a few moments when you lock yourself up and you go down the street in Manhattan. I did it a few days ago, and I saw, I would say 70% of people had some headphones on, probably not listening to an audiobook, I would assume more like music. So there are many insights and lessons we can learn about ourselves, the human condition, from these ideas. And it's more fascinating that it actually goes back these thousands of years, back to Genesis. With this Shabbat, this Shabbos, the chapter is called Beshalach, but it has an extra name called Shabbos Shira, this Shabbos of song. I've discussed this theme of song many times. I find it to be a tremendous parallel to anything that is soulful. Not only a parallel, it is soulful on its own, but I find it also an excellent tool to talk about spiritual matters. Because when you talk about, let's say, the PARSHA, or you talk about some other Jewish ritual or tradition or holiday or anything like that, it's some people take to it and they are interested, but many are not. Many are turned off by rituals. But music is an excellent way into the soul. We've done events here, Meaningful Life Center, many times, musical events. Actually, this whole class began, really, the core group were people from the music industry. Most people were from music. It's not surprising to me, because the parallels, as I said, the commonalities between soul and music are impossible to deny. So I find it to be a gift. They tell the parable of when God created the world. He said to the angels, he consulted the angels, which is a common description in different midrashim, consulting the angels, and usually God didn't listen to them anyway. Like we all do. You hire a consultant, you don't listen. So God did the same. He would talk to these angels and said to them, should I give the human race music and art? And the angels immediately said, absolutely not. Humans are selfish. They'll abuse it. They'll commercialize it. They won't appreciate it. Give it to us. We will sing your praises. We'll appreciate the sublime power of music instead of abusing it. God considered their opinion and said, no, I reject what you're saying. And God said, I will give it because I want that the human race should have something to remember me with. So think of a world without music. Think of a world without song. It's hard to imagine. Now, I understand song doesn't just mean when you're singing. It means we have a melodic rhythm inside of us. Why does song resonate? Studies show, there are actual experiments, that not just newborn children react to music. That's not so surprising. It's also surprising, but not so. But even children in the womb, as I mentioned, in the waters of the embryonic womb, fluids, respond to music. There's studies, they tried this, they played music near a mother's womb, a future mother's womb, and the child reacted to it. You tried enough times and you saw. No, they didn't go for a whole boogie and dance, that's true. There's really not a lot of room on the dance floor inside the womb. But there was enough movement to indicate that the child responded. Now the question, of course, everyone asks, and still is, no one has developed a theory. How? For someone to respond to something, you have to have some point of reference. If you heard music, you're a young child, so of course you respond, you get older. Even language, conventional language, speaking is also pretty miraculous. And there's all kinds of linguistic theories about how children so quickly at age 2, 3 are already speaking. It's pretty amazing. Try to teach someone who can't speak to speak. That should take a lifetime. So there are theories that children definitely have already language within them even before they actually be able to express language. Today's studies show children, even the youngest age, make sounds. Those sounds are not insignificant. And of course, with children listening to their parents, so the parent speaking is, of course, impresses on the child. That's why you'll find this child will speak English, and this one Hebrew, or this one French, depending on who's speaking to them. But it's clearly not just mimicking. Because if it was mimicking, it would take a lot more to be able to have intelligent speech. To mimic, maybe like a parakeet, just say some words. But a child develops intelligent speech. They're able to, many words they'll mimic what they hear, but at some point their words associate with an intelligent response. More or less by age 3, 4, children are speaking almost completely. Obviously with exceptions. We're talking about developing the whole repertoire of vocabulary. It's another story. But there, you can explain it, okay, there must be something in the spirit that has language in it. There has to be, as I said, the parroting and the role modeling of parents and the adult that speak around them. And all that comes together to speech. But song, where did the child hear song? How does the child know there's music? Why is it responding? Well, according to Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, Hasidic thought, it's not a surprise at all. First of all, music is about rhythm. Rhythm. It's a rhythm. It's a soothing rhythm, and it's aligned to the rhythm of our souls. As a matter of fact, in Hasidic literature, it talks about that a soul cannot travel without a song. We human beings' bodies travel with our legs or with vehicles, and a soul travels with a song, as you and I experience it. You can have millions of frequent flyer miles, and your soul may have not moved an inch in 30 years. And you can have another person who's not moved physically, but their soul soars to the highest places. So when you say you're trapped, trapped and freeing yourself from being trapped is not a physical thing. You can have somebody who's sitting in 5 hours in one place, and they're the freest person on earth. And you have another person who's running from place to place, and they're completely enslaved. They can't find any peace. Because soaring on that level is a soulful experience. As I said, music. You could be sitting in a place, listening to a song, and traveling who knows where. Intellectually, emotionally, psychically, spiritually. So this theme I've discussed many times, and I don't want to go over all that I've discussed in the past. We have it archived. You want to access it, you just go to meaningfullife.com, type in song, you get a whole slew of stuff on music and song. And I want to address it more in the context, as I said, have you lost your voice? Or have you never found it? In the context of who we are. So to go back with the child analogy here, song is the language of the soul, and therefore for a child it doesn't have to be taught. It's the closest language of the child. As a matter of fact, language, the language we speak, is far more unnatural than song. That's why a child in the mother's womb would not respond to words. If you were able to, let's say, amplify words, would the child respond to a command? Stop, don't, yes, no? Absolutely not. No one even has such a consideration. But music it responds to, because music is the most natural thing to a song. So think about that. If that would be the case, one could develop a theory that if you continue singing to the song, singing to a child after it's born, or the rest of its life, this child will be in its most natural environment. Think of that. So imagine, maybe that's what we should be doing. As soon as a child is born, continue singing. Everything should be done with sing-song. And everything should be in that context. That's the best way to cultivate a confident and nurture a child, just like water. You keep the child surrounded by water. Now, obviously, after pregnancy, once the fetus emerges, the baby emerges, you can't surround it actually in water, even though some have, underwater births and all of that type of stuff. But that can't last too long. But music can. Now, music doesn't mean necessarily physically always singing to the child. It means that the child is hearing music. Imagine you had a friend, and you could say, every time this person speaks to me, I feel like they're singing a melody to me. That would be pretty cool, right? I mean, lovers would love to think that, in a romantic sense of things, that's what's happening. Unfortunately, it's not usually the case. We have people perhaps that we enjoy and we like and we may even love, but not every time they say something do we always feel a melody. Sometimes yeah, sometimes not. So interestingly, if you think of it that way, maybe the world really, in the most natural place, is a song, and everything else is an aberration. And this is the world in which we live, a disconnected world from a world on land, and a world that song is a novelty. It allows you to escape to, but it's not our natural space. So with that idea in mind, you can say, listen, if I could connect to the song inside of me, and I can access it at will, whenever I wish, that perhaps carries the secret to finding confidence in yourself. And as long as you don't have a connection to that, and you're depending on other forces to give you security and a sense of purpose, perhaps you're barking up the wrong tree, going in the wrong place. I say it all perhaps simply because I don't like to speak in a didactic and dogmatic way, but that's exactly what I would like to suggest. That we have really like two personalities going on in our lives. When things resonate, it's that inner real you that's suddenly triggered. The word resonance. What's resonance mean? Resonance comes from the term, to resonate is like, they used to use a pitchfork or a sound fork. I should say, not a pitchfork, but it comes from pitchfork. That today it's also used by musicians and so on. When a certain frequency, it will vibrate. That's resonance. We all resonate. When you hear their sounds, for example, we do not hear. They're either too low or too high on the scale. When something resonates, now what's the opposite of resonance? A grating sound when you're annoyed. And I'm not going to ask you to imagine the screeching sound of chalk on a board. Just thinking about it can make you a little nervous, right? Words that grate on you are non-resonating. Resonance is when it's smooth. It's pleasant to the ear. It just fits in. It doesn't disturb. On the contrary, it's calming. It's calming because it's aligned. So think of it like, just to give an example, think of like you draw a perfect circle, piece of paper, and then you bring another circle that's incomplete or jagged, and you juxtapose it, and you place it one upon the other, and you immediately see how the jagged or the broken circle, the incomplete one, you see the contrasts, how it is dissonant from the perfect circle. In any type of education, good education, you always have the good teacher will always convey to you a model that you can look at as contrast, for contrast purposes. Because if you don't have one, you never know where you're at. So let's say you're studying music or art, or for that matter, any science. So it's important to know what has a master achieved. Now you may never become a master, but you need to know what is excellence. You need to know what is the standard of excellence before you can, and then you can say, okay, here's where I stand comparatively speaking. So the same is true psychologically. Our models, because our models are flawed, we don't necessarily even know what would be considered, I don't want to say perfect because there's no such thing as perfect human being, but what would be considered harmonious and a tranquil and a pleasant and a healthy life? How would you define a healthy life? I've asked many people this question. It's shocking what most people say when it comes to answering a healthy life. And it's not shocking really when you think about it, because where do we get our answer from? Based on what we saw or what we experienced. Healthy love, this is a good one. Healthy love. How do we know what healthy love is? Very difficult to answer that. Your love you know about, the first time you've experienced love is in your parents' home. How they loved each other and how they loved you is what becomes your standard. That becomes your backdrop of what love will be. And if it's a screwed up love and a dysfunctional one, that becomes your standard. And it's always going to be a challenge to figure out how to move from there. Because if you think this is a certain love expects or requires so and so and it's not healthy, you think that's what you should be aspiring to. And it could be that you're actually feeding the things that are exactly opposite of love. Especially when it comes to emotional spectrum of our lives, we learn it very quickly and very early in our impressionable years, and that becomes our standard. If you're able to even define that standard, you're already halfway towards some healing. Problem is, it gets so embedded in us, we don't even think of it as a standard or an option. We see, this is it. And then, unconsciously, everything we do is basically confirming or just consequence of this so-called embedded standard that has been engraved inside of us. So any type of growth requires being able to challenge your standards. But then that already gets into challenging your comfort zone. And if you grew up in an environment where challenging a comfort zone was forbidden and taboo, that itself becomes your standards never to challenge the status quo, and never to challenge yourself. Growing up in, let's say, an insecure environment, and I'm just using, I can't say a worst case scenario, but not a good scenario. We have two parents who are insecure. So their whole life is based on creating false picture of what is healthy, what is not, because they're covering their own insecurities. And you as a child growing up in a home like that, that's the standard. That's the standard. And it creates a distortion. And then the rest of your life is trying to live up to that distortion. And looking at others who don't fit into your distortion as being something wrong with them. Pretty tragic to think of your life that way. Obviously, I'm not exaggerating. I'm just speaking about it in more frank terms because to make the point. But we all have this issue. And the biggest problem is our blind spots. We don't know. Someone will say, okay, so how am I supposed to figure out what part of my standard is healthy and what's not healthy? And what happens if it's all like mixed together? Because there's no such thing as good without evil and evil without good. To say our standard of love is completely distorted, 100% is unlikely. To say it's completely perfect is also unlikely. So the question is, how do we distinguish? How do we know which part of it is a healthier part, which is not? Well, we have two ways to know that. Number one is, thank God, we have each other. So you can consult an objective person. You could say, this is how I see it. How do you see it? So right there, someone who's less subjective than you, and someone you can trust, can share another perspective, which, if you're honest, may challenge yours. And the second thing we have is history. We have texts. One of the reasons for Jews, particularly, we always held on so with our lives for the Torah, because it wasn't just a holy book and God's book, it was also a documentation of our legacy, of our history. Which means, imagine you can sit down with all the wisest people from the beginning of time and have a conversation with them. Jews were wise enough to document their experiences. So you literally can sit down with the smartest people, men and women, throughout history. Imagine with all the smartest grandfathers and grandmothers, and speak to them and say, tell us what you learned. Which gives you also the ability to somewhat get out of your own subjective place and have another perspective. And I should add a third thing. So besides friends and let's call it text and history, there's a third element that helps us challenge our own standards, and that is resonance. There are things that resonate. Now this alone can be dangerous because sometimes something resonates, that can be a distortion based on something you picked up. But there's some things that resonate that are not that way. Because no matter what happens in your early age and your impressionable age, there's still things that remain resonant because your soul never gets annihilated. Like I mentioned with music before. Music touched you long before any culture did, long before any parent did, because it's part of who you are. So the point being, like he says in the Song of Songs, a beautiful statement, he says, I may be asleep, but my heart is awake. So a lot of you may be distorted, a lot of us may be unable to hear, but there's a part of us that is always awake. And the right word, at the right time, the right song that will touch you, that is going to be your salvation. Now, as I said, when you combine that with the first two things I mentioned, having objective friends that care about you and are sensitive and are trusting, and having a book or a standard by which to study and to compare your soul to, then the resonance can be trusted as well. So it's these three forces that are key to any type of real movement from what you think you are to what you really are. And of course this is the hard work. Because as I said before, we all have a unique voice. There's no question about it. Sometimes it gets completely drowned out. You almost can't even know what it is. And you ask people, do you think you have a unique voice? And then most people say yes. I don't know, they say yes simply out of pride, dignity. And then when you ask somebody, what is that unique voice? That gets a little more complicated. What it is. And the reason for that is, if you go back, as I said, back to childhood, we all began a healthy child, which means you and I, once upon a time, were crawling around on the floor somewhere, right? You can rest assured that's what we were all doing, and exploring the world in which we lived. And uninhibited, we tried everything. Sometimes to the chagrin of our parents, they had to stuff up electrical outlets or other things not to get children to get their fingers in there, or the cabinets under the sinks not to get their hands on dangerous substances. So, but a child on its own is an explorer, and each of us was that type of explorer, and we were basically exploring our voice. Now, of course, at some point you stop crawling, you start walking. Fine, that doesn't stop your exploration. But what really happens? Where do we lose? Or when does this start slowing down? This so-called uninhibited curiosity is when the adults around you start slowing you down. When it becomes like an expectation that this is not, no, you have to do this, you have to do that. Now obviously discipline is necessary and guidance is necessary, but what happens is the one who pays the price is your voice. And your inner voice begins to slowly subside. In more extreme dysfunctional environments, it gets silenced consistently. In less, it gets quieter. And what happens is a unique individual with an absolutely unique voice suddenly starts becoming a conformist. Some become pleasers, complying to make everybody happy because they don't want to be punished, they don't want to be embarrassed, they don't want to be humiliated. They don't want to rock the boat, and this will play itself out later in life when there's avoiding confrontation at all costs, even when you shouldn't, avoiding decisions, a whole second guessing of yourself because your voice was not respected, it was not validated, not reinforced. Or you become a defiant spirit, a rebellious, because of the suppression. You fight against it. You become defiant soul. Not necessarily because you're by nature a defiant person, but simply it's like a person who's been suppressed for so long and they rebel. They cry out, I want my voice. And suddenly either way, interestingly, you don't find your voice either way. One is suppressed, the other one is not necessarily your voice. It's a voice of desperation, just defying, and you become somebody maybe you don't even like, or somebody you don't even want to be. Now again, this doesn't mean, again, extremes, because it's never 100%. That's why you need to qualify. This isn't like complete suppression, or complete suppression are the extreme cases you read about. Those tragic stories of children that were locked in basements for years, didn't even have a name. What was the name of that story a few years ago? Those are extreme situations. Where there, obviously, it's obvious how horrific the consequences of that are. But less extreme is our story. And if you ask yourself, so where do you stand? It's not so simple. It's hard to say, because here, whether it's defiance, and you're like really mouthing off, or you're just a pleaser, you don't even know whether any of them are your voice. Maybe they're all shaped by other forces as well. But as I said, we have the three antidotes, is the word, the three methods. One is finding an objective party that can help you discover, because on your own you may not be able to see it clearly. Having some standard, as I said, a text. I teach every morning maybe the most complicated of all mystical Hasidic texts. It's called Ayin Beis, by the name of the year that was delivered 100 years ago. And especially in the last few months, you can find it online. We put it on YouTube every day. The last few months especially has been an extremely fascinating discussion of what I'll call the supraconscious. We know about the subconscious, we know about the unconscious, supraconscious. There's reasons I give it that name. It's not so relevant to our discussion here. But let's put it this way. It's the beyond the conscious. If the conscious is the surface level that you are aware of, so what is on the other side of the sphere, or the stratosphere, which Freudian thought called unconscious, but called supraconscious, are forces that you cannot directly access. You only see their impact on you. And sometimes not even that. But the fascinating thing, why am I mentioning it, is because when you study it, you literally have the second thing I said. You have a text that maps out for you what a healthy consciousness and a healthy superconscious or unconscious should look like. And then you have the third element, the resonance. Sometimes you read something, you say, this sounds right. And that sounds right, we're not talking about you're invested in it, so it should sound right to make you feel comfortable. That's usually not so trustworthy. When I suddenly read something, it sounds right, it's like a song. It's something about this sounds right. Now, I'm not suggesting that's empirical evidence of its truth, but it's something to work with. Especially when you're dealing with psychological and personal matters. If it sounds right, and again, you don't have any investment in it sounding right or not sounding right, in other words, you have no vested interest, it's not something to ignore. Now, of course, you can go into a talk and hear someone speak, and it can sound right. They can be very emotionally manipulative. There are people who are charming, and they're seductive, and they're hypnotic even, and they can convince you of anything. So clearly, that's why I said resonance alone is not always a litmus test, because it depends on you, how impressionable you are, and how not impressionable, how suggestive you are. But if you couple resonance with text, with a friend, objective friend, you pretty much can get yourself some direction, because you have a sounding board to test different ideas. So here we go. We have then a self, a perception of ourself as it is right now, and we have a self that some way something's happened to it, and we don't know how much has happened and how much of our real voice has emerged. And then the real challenge is life goes on. You can't suddenly stop and say, you know what? Let's stop the rat race. Let's stop the merry-go-round. And I'm going to stop and just figure out what's my voice. What's my superimposed voice? What shaped it? The problem is you're facing situations every day. Someone provokes you today, and you get angry. You're in a relationship, or you're not in a relationship, or you're trying to be in a relationship. A good one and you're reacting to it. You have emotional reactions. So it's not something you can only stop and say, okay, listen, I'm just going to stop and then figure out. We are right now actively acting out our lives. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. So you're acting out your life, and what are you acting it out based on? The tools, for good or for bad, of what you have before you. But the introspective person challenges themselves and asks, okay, let me step back and think about it. Unfortunately, when things are going well, or at least we think that things are going well, I should qualify that by saying we think, that's not very good motivation to do anything about it. Because everything's going well. Why rock the boat? Why fix it if it ain't broke? When we hit a snag, a crack, especially a setback, especially rock bottom as some call it, which is a very deceptive word altogether. Like one guy keeps telling me, I keep hitting new rock bottoms, which itself is interesting. Sounds like Yogi Berra type of thing. Rock bottom is rock bottom, but new levels, new lows. Just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, just when you thought you hit the low point. So these are situations that cause that they create energy. Pain is energy. And painful energy, which is discomfort, causes you to act. When you're not in pain, usually you don't act. So I'm not justifying pain, but remember, pain is actually a blessing in disguise, because pain warns you or is a motivator to do something about it. Now, if someone said to you, would you rather would you rather, God forbid, having some disease and not feel any pain, or feel pain? If you don't feel pain, you may not even know you have a disease. You won't do anything to fight it. So pain is a warning signal. It's like a red light telling you. Now it's interesting. We'd rather not have the red light go on, so we take a painkiller when we don't solve the problem. Now that's fine for superficial pain, but not when it's deeper issues. Now what about psychic pain, psychological pain, anxiety? As I've often mentioned, anxiety is the voice of your soul telling you that something's wrong. Because dead people don't have anxiety. Maybe their families do, but they don't. Not to sound so morbid. Anxiety is a voice. It's not a voice we like. It's definitely a very uncomfortable one. But it's telling you that something's wrong. It's a dissonance. It's an expression of dissonance. Because why would you be anxious? Because you're here, and something you want, or something you need, or something that is not, you don't have. And you're anxious about it. Now, of course, there's healthier anxiety than other anxieties. I like to usually say angst is healthy, and anxiety usually not so healthy. Angst, every healthy person should have a measure of angst. Angst means you're not completely consumed by animal bliss, where everything is just great all the time, which means no motivation. That's good maybe when you finish a project till the hangover is over. It's good to feel good overnight. I achieved it. But if it starts lasting too long, you basically be going to a lethargic state. There's no motivation. So it's healthy to have angst. Like we talk about the heartbeat, right? The heart, the cardiogram. It's a wave. It's a wave. Not too high, not too low. A cycle like that. That's rhythm. That's the rhythm of music as well. And a flat line is not a good sign, and you also don't want to have high peaks and low valleys. So there's a healthy to have a little bit called tension and resolution. The Hebrew word for it and the Kabbalistic discussion of it is called rotzei shuv. Rotzei means to yearn or to aspire. Tension. Shuv means to return. Resolution. So tension and resolution is a very healthy balance. It's a secret of all good writing. It's a secret of life. Which life doesn't have tension and resolution? Now you don't want to have too much tension. You don't have too much resolution. You need to have a balance. A tension that's resolved. Then you go for the next tension. That would be the healthy type of movement. That's rhythm. And that actually creates life. What's life? Life is a pump. Life is movement. Mobility. Exhale, inhale. Contract, expand. That's the secret to all electricity, to all life, is all driven by that. As a matter of fact, the Hebrew word, the modern Hebrew word for electricity, chashmal, you know where that comes from? Chashmal is the name of an angel. Yeah, it's the name of an angel that Ezekiel, the prophet Yecheskel, in his vision, he talks about hachayas rotzei. He said the energy runs to and fro, tension and resolution, and in that verse he uses the word chashmal. So, electricity, what's the symbol of electricity? Usually a lightning rod, a lightning bolt rather. A lightning bolt is always a Z. Always a positive and a negative, a tension and a resolution, because that's energy. Energy is defined in two in a what's the word? Two movements. You need some tension. You need resolution for any type of energy to be generated. The simplest example, for example, when you have to throw a stone, the farther you want it to throw, the more back you have to go. A bow and arrow, you arch back. The deeper back, the further the thrust. So the heart contracts and expands. Like that, literally, like a pump. All energy is created that way. In our lives as well. Anxiety is when there's too much angst. Anxiety is when it overwhelms you. And there's more tension than there is resolution. So the most natural child is like music, like water, what's water? A wave. Water is wave. Water travels like waves, and in physics, when they talk about light, whether it's a wave or a particle, the word wave is used, because how do the waves hit land? They don't come in just like that. They come as a wave. They don't come in as a so-called defined entity. If you were to try to localize a wave, you would never be able to. Where is a wave exactly? What is a wave? Is it the water back out in the middle of the sea coming, or is it the water right near the beach? Because when you look at it, it looks like it's traveling from somewhere, but it's actually not. It's just a force that is constantly moving, but it comes as a wave. It's a perfect example of the same cycle as music. There's the wave, there's the rhythm. So there's, as I said, the two parts of us. There's the perceived self, and there's this inner self. And when you are able to address and look at both sides, that's when you begin to discover something. So the fact is, and I can't prove this to you, and I cannot persuade you, but it's really the secret of your own life, and it's the key to your own happiness. You must believe that you have a unique voice. And if you need proof, just go back and think about, well, you may not remember it, but you can imagine that you were once a little child crawling around, exploring. You were not inhibited. You had nothing stopping you. And then things slowed down. And the question is, where is that voice today? So you can make an argument, which is not obviously where I'm leading to, that the voice, once it disappeared, once it was silenced and suppressed, that's it, it's over with. It's like killed. Some people feel that way. They feel like I was killed. My real me has been killed. And now my life is now something else. Either satisfying people or I'm defying people. Can't find a normal balance. Now tell me, who has not encountered this in the dating process? Either yourself acting out this way, or the person you're dating acting out this way. And in case that's too close to home, think of it maybe a friend that you know that's experienced this. You know that story with a chassid, a Jewish guy, came to this Rabbi Marash, and said to him, I have a friend who did something really bad, and he's acting out in a certain way, and he's ashamed to come to you. So he sent me to get advice. So the Rebbe looked at him and said to him, why would he expose himself to you? He could have come to me and say, I have a friend. You know. So sometimes the best way to address a problem, sometimes if it's too close to yourself, you say, it's a friend of mine. So we all have a friend inside of us that you can talk about, so it's not so threatening. So sometimes we need that as well. Fine, it's not a problem. When we're little kids, that's what we do. We sometimes go to the mirror and we have a friend in the mirror, and sometimes we have a little friend, an imaginary friend that we say hello to and goodbye to, and so it's all right. So who has not experienced this element, especially people whose voice has been somewhat silenced in some way or suppressed? That in dating process you begin to test the other person in ways that are not regular. Because when you have not found your own voice, or if you lost your voice, so you're constantly searching for the respect. Will someone respect you? And you'll do things that are far more, you'll test and test and test, and sometimes make your dating partner miserable. Because, they don't understand. Why do you keep doing that? Why haven't I not earned your trust? So for anyone in that situation, the person who's doing the testing, or the person who's on the miserable end of it, it's important to understand when you see that, and you see it persistently, it's a given, it's a textbook. It's a given of a person crying out who's not found their voice yet. So the way they do it is, people get close to them, they keep testing, they keep seeing, will you respect my voice? Now the truth is, if the person was in touch, they would understand why you're taking it out on that person. Why don't you realize that it's like someone who hasn't drank water for 10 years. So you meet somebody and they give you a cup of water, you keep saying, 1 second, will you give me another cup, another cup, another cup? It's like almost a voracious diet, like a drowning victim. What does a drowning victim do? Someone who's drowning in the water. So even when a lifeguard comes to save the person, they will never just say, oh great, save me. The drowning victim will pull down the lifeguard, or the one who's coming to save it, and pull them down. They have to have, it's a whole technique how to save a drowning victim, because when you're desperate, you don't think. You just grab anything that's near you, and you may end up killing the thing that's supposed to come to save you, because you consume it. This is a common experience in a type of dysfunctional love, where one partner is extremely needy and extremely demanding, and it's like endless, it's like bottomless. Now, sometimes it works. Why? Because the other person may have the opposite thing. They never also found their voice, but they just know how to give, and never take. So this is a perfect dysfunctional marriage, is that someone who's a complete pleaser, and the other person who's a complete taker. And it works well, because you got a giver and a taker. The problem is, it can't really last. Even though often it does last, that's not necessarily good news. It can't really last because it's not healthy for both of them. It works at times, because it's like a so-called market adjustment, but an unhealthy adjustment to unhealthy patterns. But that's not what you're looking for. What you really want to have is that both know how to give and both know how to take. Usually a person who's in that scenario, I don't know, what they call Al-Anon. You talk about people who are partners of addicts. You have what they call codependence, which is a whole phenomenon of its own. It's a whole syndrome of its own. You love somebody, and in the name of love, you want to help them. Sometimes you even have the savior syndrome. You want to save them, which is yet another issue. And what happens is, you go in with all the good intentions, and you just give. But at some point, you have to get drained. So what do you do when you get drained? You may not even take it out on the other person. You may take it out on yourself. Somewhere it has to give. Something is off. So codependency, which means you initially came to help the person, and you ended up drowning with them. And then, of course, everyone goes into denial, and no, there's no problem. So these are just examples of consequences that result from a voice that was lost or never found. This is what happens, because when you don't have a voice, you do everything possible to get it, and your pride and dignity may not even allow you to acknowledge it. So that's why you have yet another distortion, which is a person faking self-esteem. Nobody likes to be exposed. Faking self-esteem is very humiliating, but a lot of people fake it, where they say he hides his ignorance with his arrogance. He hides his lack of self-confidence with his arrogance. So sometimes people who seem so confident and aggressive and assertive and so on, they could be just a little scared child who's figured out a way to compensate for it all. So I can go on and on with every nightmare scenario of relationships. I'm sure I don't need to remind you all. You probably have your own share of set of experiences. As I said, if not you, a friend or a friend of a friend. Somewhere there's degrees of separation. You'll find something going on out there. The key here is to understand this negative consequences is really meant to identify the positive. The positive is that you do have a voice. That's the key. You must know you have a voice. You have it. No one has it instead of you. And it's critical you have to discover it. So as I said, you could have the attitude, I'm damaged goods, I lost it, that was it. My parents knocked out of me, this one knocked it out of me. What Judaism teaches, there's no such thing. The pilot's flame never gets extinguished, period. Because the soul is divine. It's a simple axiom that if you need to remind yourself this 1,000,000 times a day, do it. We start every morning, we say, Moda Ani, I acknowledge to you, God, for returning my soul to me. And I'll go a step further. And I'm not even saying it as a religious statement, even though it may sound religious. I always say to therapists I know and anyone that's working with souls and psyches and so on, the most fundamental principle, beyond all the techniques and methods, is the belief and faith in the soul of the other person and its ability to get beyond any challenge it had. When I hear a therapist tells me they don't believe that, I said, so what, you're taking money from a client? Why don't you tell them you don't believe that you can help them? They say, well, I'm helping them by soothing them. I'm helping. It's a poor soul. He has no one to talk to. So he pays me $150 an hour to have someone to talk to. Okay, that's nice, Then probably this therapist could figure out to do a recording. You don't even have to show up. The guy thinks he's talking to someone. Just being cynical a bit. But the point I'm making here is that to me this is of all messages in Torah and Judaism, all the Bible, everything we hear, the single most important and fundamental, more than anything else, is that you matter, that you were created in a divine image, and that you're absolutely unique, and your voice can never be extinguished, no matter what happens to you. And to me, any healer has to be dedicated to that above all. You don't have that, what are you going to? Then everything else falls. Because then you could say, hey, you know what? Too bad, damaged goods. Someone got into an accident, something was severed, and no way back. So what do you want? I mean, yes, you can create damage control, minimize the collateral damage, consequences, etc. To me, this was when it resonated with me that the Bible begins that what is the description of the human being? You were creating the divine image. That to me, that was it. And that's the importance of God and soul more than anything else. To me, that was the key. I don't need a proof of God exists. To me, if you don't have that, you don't have hope. And if you don't have hope, what can life be like? We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fail at some things. And some places, sometimes it'll be a serious wound. And if you grew up in a dysfunctional home and with serious wounds, what do you do then? Life is over? So basically the essence of the hope in every relationship, that you can find a loving partner and build a healthy home and bring up healthy children, is based on one key principle, that your soul, the core of it, is never damaged. Even if arteries have been blocked, even if outer surface layers, and I mean it metaphorically, have in some way been compromised, even if your voice has been suppressed, but it doesn't mean your voice has been annihilated. It just means it's hidden in there. And the challenge is, how do you find it? But you'll never find it if you don't believe it's there. There's no way psychologically you can find something if you don't think it's there. And you'll see this key to success of anyone that's been successful, it was not because they necessarily had all the confidence in the world and so on. You read the stories of Steve Jobs. So he had one, Isaacson's book and others, and the things he's achieved. He became some type of icon. And when you read his story, you don't necessarily like him in every way possible. I'm not trying to idolize him. But you see a man that had a very difficult life. For a big part of his life, he didn't even know who his parent was. But you see, you'll always see excellence in whatever area it is. And I'm not saying his excellence is necessarily the biggest thing in history. Apple today is a phenomenon. I'm just describing it as a case study in a person that it came down to that there was some belief in something that kept him going, and failure did not deter him. Even being thrown out of his own company, Apple, didn't deter. You'll see this consistently. Everyone who's achieved something, you'll find a place where they were pain, loss, and they did not succumb. And all the rest, which is the road that most people travel, don't make history. That's why we don't talk about them. Everyone you talk about, you check out their life story, you'll find somewhere a major challenge, and they did not succumb. Because nobody isn't challenged in life. So of course, then we all say, okay, so what is the secret they have? Well, I think it comes down to that they do not allow themselves ever to believe that I'm completely damaged. No matter how bad things are, there's something alive. To me, this is the essence of faith in God. You may not like the word God, so don't use God. Say faith in your soul, faith in yourself, whatever it is. To me, I don't care about the word. It's the concept. Because if it's just about you, you can say, hey, you know what? We're human beings. Some of us get damaged along the way, and that's that. Too bad. But if you have something inside of you that is not so human, that's not so man-made, so men and women, for that matter, cannot damage it because they didn't create it. To me, this is the essence of why God is important. Because it really gives mankind, gives each of us the ability to know you can get beyond anything. So I'm not trying to make a case here against atheism, you know. I think that atheists believe they just don't call it God, they call it something else. And I think Richard Dawkins is a big believer, except he's God. He believes in himself more than in anything else. Now I understand that there's some people who misrepresent religion and God as this fairy tale image of a guy in heaven with a long white beard waiting to strike us with lightning. So as I've said many times, as Levi Yitzchak Berditchever said to the self-proclaimed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. If that's God, you can consider me too. Me, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, also an atheist. However, if God is that force within us all, an eternal force that nothing can vanquish, that's a whole different story. You don't accept that, then you know what, you're basically writing off yourself. That's what it comes down to. Because that's where the true value of a soul is about. So number one is you must know you have that voice. And then you have to find the people and find the texts and find the resonance that helps you access it. So in a Shabbos like this, when we talk about song, that's what it's about. Everybody has a song. Everybody. Now the interesting thing is when we listen to music, we're listening to someone else's songs singing, because you didn't compose them. You just like them. It's one thing to sing along and to dance along. It's another is to compose. So maybe that's a good exercise, you know. When no one's around, so it won't be embarrassing. I'm sure some of us do it anyway. You ever try to think of a new song? It's not so easy to do, because every song, as soon as you start thinking of a song, it's always a song that you once heard. But you look at people who actually compose new melodies, they'll all say it always begins with something. No one begins with a melody out of scratch, nowhere. You always have something. However, it goes in a different direction. So it's a nice exercise. I'm not suggesting we're all composers per se, and we can create a song that other people are going to like, but create a song that you like, you know. And no one else may ever hear it, but you know it's your voice. You know, I work with writers. As a writer myself, I train writers. I have different staff and others. I always say to every writer I ever meet, I say, and they say, okay, so what are the guidelines and what's, you know, the expectations? I say, look, you write as wild as you can about it. You, with unlimited, goes crazy, write like a maniac, write like a meshugana. Because you could always tame something down. You can't make it crazier, you know. Because in writing, like it is with music or with anything, you want someone to just spread their wings and just do everything possible. Because as soon as you tell guidelines, you're immediately constraining and suppressing the voice. So writing, as in physical exercise, as in song, as in almost many different hobbies, you can find ways where you just experiment in just completely spreading your wings. And I would always suggest doing things in situations where it's not threatening. You know, someone whose voice has been suppressed, and you suddenly say, listen, tell me what you really believe. Tell me what you really think. Not that simple. If the years and years they've silenced themselves, or others have silenced them, then just suddenly someone gives you permission and you start talking. It doesn't happen that easily. So you find so-called backdoor entrance. You find exercises, and this can be completely off the, something completely off the wall. You want to go mountain climbing. Go do something. It doesn't even have to be excellent at it, but be yourself. Do it completely your own way. Now, obviously, as I said, some things can be embarrassing. That's why we have showers. We have other places where nobody else is with us, where you can just behave as insane as you like. But it has a very freeing power to do that, to go out into the woods and just yell to the heavens. It has power. The power it has is because what happens is you allow yourself to express something that maybe was never allowed to be expressed. I can't tell you how many people tell me how their parents, their father or mother said, no, you don't say that. You don't do that. You never cry. Babies cry. All that type of stuff. These are horrible things. I mean, they sound innocuous and not that aggressive, not even abusive, but it's real abuse because you're basically telling a person. And I'm not talking about a child misbehaving, saying to the child, say thank you, show gratitude, be nice, and so on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about on a constant basis bashing a child's creativity. Excitement. Child comes home excited. Children are excited about things that maybe adults may not get so excited about. A healthy parent embraces that excitement. Not because you get excited by the little toy or drawing the child made, but the child's excitement has value. And on the child's level, when it hears you validate it, it's excitement. That's a validation that will pay dividends forever. Because one day the child will not necessarily value that little drawing, but they'll do other things. And will they be validated then, or will they remember that as soon as you do something a little of your own, it's questioned, it's laughed at, it's dismissed, and so on. It's tragic what adults can do to children. What can I say? Anytime parents come over to me and say, bless my children or something, I always say, I bless you, don't corrupt your children. That's what I always say. That's the blessing. You don't need, it's like flowers in the garden. You don't need to bless the flowers. You need to bless the gardener to make sure the flowers are allowed to emerge, and don't let the weeds destroy the flowers. Flowers will do what's fine. Look, God created very interesting. A child develops in the mother's womb. We didn't figure that one out. That comes from another place. Just don't get in the way. Don't do things that are destructive. Life will take care of itself. Problem is we get in the way, we distort, and so on. It's like that's what I said. Let do what you have to do. Water the garden, nurture the child, and you'll have a beautiful child grow up. Make sure it feels that it's indispensable and valuable, validated. How many people today tell you, I see this as a trend almost. Well, not almost. I think it's an actual trend. It's an interesting one. I still consider myself young. I still feel like I'm 17, 18 years old, just for the record. This is my delusion, so please don't bust my bubble here. But at the same time, look, I've been around a little, and I've seen different things, and you grow and you mature. Hopefully not too mature. You want to be a little immature too. So one thing that strikes me that I see, see things as things develop, is I've studied and I've seen people like a student of the human condition, and when you care and you speak to people, you have empathy, you observe certain things. They say the trends. Okay, there's the baby boomer age that began essentially mid-50s. Not mid-50s, late 40s, and after World War II, basically till the early 60s. Then they have Generation X, and there's Generation Y, and there's the Millennium children. There's the whole cycles. So, being a baby boomer, born in the late 50s, so I've studied and I see interesting trends. We know that in the 60s there was a sexual revolution. One of its direct impacts was the rate of divorce that went up. Divorce suddenly zoomed up. The different analysis, why, etc., the whole marriage institution, and many other factors. But one thing you see a generation that was suddenly being born without necessarily having two parents, definitely not two healthy parents around them all the time. So it's an interesting study what kind of generation will come out of this. Okay. Now, obviously, human beings are very resilient, so we figure out things. This doesn't mean everybody gets destroyed, but it's interesting. Now we already are a second generation from there, and I notice a trend which I haven't seen really anyone write about, because I guess it's just really the age is coming now. You're talking about the grandchildren of the baby boomers. So you now already have like a second generation of dysfunctionality. At least, I'm not suggesting there wasn't dysfunctionality before the 50s, but we're talking about in this modern age, where you can document it and witness it. I'm a living witness. I grew through this. I'm not talking here reading in a book about a generation that has died. We're talking about a generation that is now emerging. And I see an interesting trend. I see as people collectively, and technology definitely helps, because now everybody amplifies their voice, everybody hears everybody else's misery, which has interesting impact on the collective consciousness. So there's an interesting trend that I notice. I'll give you an example. I'll capture it with an actual episode. College students in the 60s are known to have been the whole hippie movement, anti-war movement, pro-drug, pro-free sex, music, sex and rock and roll, as they put it there. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And if you met college students of that age, of that period, you see the images. They're anti-establishment, long hair, doing things that were, extreme, literally in the face, spitting in the face of the establishment. You see it in the behavior back in the West Coast and Haight-Ashbury and other type of, I'm not saying everyone, but that was a movement, demonstrating on campuses. Now, young people by nature are rebellious. So that we have a young generation today. You don't see that type of movement. So I had the direct first-hand experience of having students in my house a number of months ago. Campuses, Chabad on campus from all over the country brought around 1,000 students from every campus in this country. I mean, a very good selection from east to west to north to south in the United States. And in my own home, I had several hundred of them through the night, and it was interesting to study them. Now I spoke about it with them. And you're looking for, like, are these students, why are these young people not challenging establishment quite the way their predecessors did? And I found something very interesting. It's my own little observation. That they are, in a different way completely. There it was with defiance. There it was, as I said, standing out. Here, and at my table, there were a lot of excellent students, but their defiance is far more. They want to build healthy families. That's for them defiance. They're sick and tired of having. I remember one young woman, very 28, extremely educated, extremely bright and articulate. She said, my whole childhood was running from my father's house to my mother's house. Couldn't stand it. I don't want to give my children such a life. And I saw the way others reacted to it. By no means is this a scientific study. So let me just qualify it. It's just an observation. And I saw their rebellion is against the dysfunctionality that they experienced. It's an interesting twist. So in the 60s, the rebellion was against establishment, against the rules, against the corruption, against the status quo, against Nixon, against Johnson, whatever. And now it's far more, they don't even care about politics. It's completely about personal. And it's like, I want to build a healthy home. I'm looking for ways to find love. I said, but you were studying to be a lawyer. Why aren't you focusing on that? Yeah, that's a job, but I'm not going to let that destroy my rest of my life. I wish this is a trend. I can't say it's a trend yet, but it's definitely, I saw something that I pointed out to a number of people, and they say it's true. I asked some college professors who I know. They say, people who are in the campus world. So it's interesting. If it's true, which makes total sense, it's like a rebound effect. After a while, enough people who did not grow up in very healthy homes are sick and tired. They don't want to have that. So if you have a few people, okay, it's quiet. Now, as I said, it's all broadcast. Now, let the dysfunctional rise. Today and what does he say? As Marx wrote, there's a specter haunting the world. It's a different type of specter. Why do I say this? Because I see a voice emerging that's a very healthy voice amidst a world that wasn't so healthy. So it's very hopeful to see something like that. That means that despite what they've gone through, despite of being so-called invalidated and silenced, people want their voice to be heard. And it's in many different ways this happens. Not always healthy ways. It's a given that when you are desperate, you do whatever it takes. But it could be healthy. So I'm thinking about saying the following. That, I was just reading today, this morning in Ayin Beis, he said he said a rule, an axiom, that pain always reaches deeper than pleasure. That's what he says. Which confirms something I once heard from a professor. I was in Lima, Peru a number of years ago. We did a conference on happiness. The professor said that you need to win $4,000 to compensate for the loss of $1,000. In other words, the joy of getting 1,000 is not equal to the loss of losing 1,000. You need to gain 4 times as much. I don't know if 4 is the exact number, but it's not equal. Now, initially you could say, okay, because we have a sense of entitlement, and when we get something, we feel we deserve it, and when it's taken from us, we feel we don't. But it's not that simple. Even though they speak about the pain principle and the pleasure principle, I remember meeting a guy, I think his name was Hal Linder. He worked at at the time he worked at a big advertising agency. I met with him, I was brought to a meeting, wanted to talk about how do you change consciousness about certain things. And he was involved, interestingly, in 2 campaigns, 2 major advertising campaigns in the United States, both working for the government. One was anti-smoking, and the other was seatbelts. Now these were very extremely difficult campaigns. Why? Because I remember, and some of you may remember, wearing a seatbelt was for nerds. Nobody wore a seatbelt. You're cool, you don't wear a seatbelt. And smoking was the coolest thing you did. Everybody smoked. It was on television, it was on movies, everywhere was smoking. So you're dealing with 2 embedded things in a culture, And they're separate campaigns. I'm just mentioning them all in one. And they were saying, how do you change people's attitudes? And everyone knew you can't just legislate and call it criminal, and you just ticket everybody that had seatbelts, because 99% of the country was not wearing seatbelts. They couldn't do that. They had to change the attitude. So they worked on making the seatbelts more comfortable and making signals to warn you, the whole shtick. They came up with this. They have to find, how do you break a routine or a perception that something is not cool? You have to get somewhere into the brain something that's deeper than being cool. And what's deeper than being cool is to be alive. They said the primal sense that you don't want to die. And hence the campaign, seatbelts save lives. Simple as save lives. And they bombarded the country with statistics and data, how many 100,000 people died this year from car accidents, more than any other more than plane crashes, more than cancer, etc., etc. True statistics. But they were going for one thing, the pain. We do not want pain. We don't want death. Seatbelts save lives. They didn't want to say seatbelts, no seatbelts kill. But in smoking, what they say smoking kills. Same message. It kills and saves lives. Because that, in the part of that brain, that's what people don't want. So it was an interesting observation. So what I'm suggesting here is that each of us has, I'm sure, grief or loss or some type of trauma, some pain. Pain is energy, or else you wouldn't feel it. However, we'll call it inverted energy. Think of it like a black hole. Instead of illuminating, it implodes and it ties you up. The question is, how do you tap a loss? How do you tap, let's say, a lost childhood, lost paradise? How do you tap that into turning it into something of positive energy? That's the key. Because just to say, listen, I didn't have a voice, now I'm going to find my voice. So, as I said, you need to have the absolute confidence it's there. Number two, you have to have people that you believe in you. There's no way you can do this on your own. Because remember, if you could do it on your own, you would have done it a long time ago. And who doesn't want to get out of that? Who does not want to discover their voice? So it's not that you're lacking motivation, it's you're lacking confidence, you're lacking the tools. So having people, as I said, both objective people and people who support is vital. Studying the texts that talk about what your soul is like before it was damaged, so to speak. I don't say damaged, before it was suppressed. And finally, as I said, resonance. Finding things that resonate. Finding things where you feel strong. Let's say you're not confident in your voice in 1,000 different ways. Find one area that you say, this I like to do. It could be a hobby. It can be studying. It can be reading. Anything. Something that's uniquely yours. That's yours. Not because someone told you to do it and not because you're pleasing somebody else. These are methods that help you access that component inside of you. And then this final point that I'm making, which is probably the most challenging, is how you change negative energy into positive energy. I can only give an example, well, I give many, but I'll give one example, personal example, because I know this resonates and works, because it worked for me. Thank God I was blessed, I must say, and, no complaints, to not experience 1% of the traumas I describe here, and unfortunately that many others have. Grew up relatively healthy home. Everything's relative, of course. Depends who you ask, But I cannot compare it to the horrors of an abusive home. For sure not. For me, the loss that I can discuss as an adult is my loss of my father's death. I'll just use it as an example. It happened almost 9 years ago. There's not many moments in the day that I don't think about it. Sometimes more consciously, less consciously. Obviously not with the shock and trauma of the time. My father was 70 years old, so I can't say it was an accident that happened when he was 30 or 40. Not to say, I don't think death can be measured anyway. A death is a death. Even if you lose a father at 100 years old, it's going to be a trauma. Because a death has a finality to it. You can't see that person again. It has a whole series of an abyss that you haven't seen. Let's put it that way. I hope none of you ever experience this taste of death. But if you have, you'll immediately identify with what I'm saying. I'm just using it as an example. It can be any trauma, any hurt, anything. More extreme, less extreme. Tremendous grief. Very hard to put into words, being that I speak and I write, and I always look for words even for things you can't, to words even for the wordless. I would say it's to me hands down the most definitive experience of my life, more than anything else. Definitive doesn't mean necessarily the best, but the most definitive. And the way I understand it is because a parent is part of your foundation. It's like the foundation of a building. You may not see it, but there's no building that could stand without it. And your father and mother, for that matter, but your parent has been with you long before you'll ever remember. My earliest memory is my father walking with me, holding my hand. So, and then there's all this, so it's so deeply part of your conscious and unconscious that suddenly when it's not there in the conventional way, it has a tremendous effect on your whole psyche. I'm going to go analyze it to death here, but no pun intended. But I remember the grief, the loss, the sense of, almost like the material world didn't matter at all. I remember after we stood up from Shiva, I went for a walk. We walk. It's a tradition to take a walk on the street. It was like 7 days where you really, I went outside, but 7 days you're just surrounded by people, and taking a walk. And I remember I was walking with my sister, and I said to her, because like nothing mattered. We passed, I remember, a pizza shop. I tend to like pizza once in a while. Not too often, once in a while. And like it totally didn't matter. It was like insignificant. It was like this material. Literally, it wasn't necessarily a spiritual experience, but it was like the material. Who really cares? When you see a place where life and death, you see something final, and you realize how life is fragile and all that, and things. It suddenly rips the veneer of this secure, so-called material world away. And I remember asking my sister, I said, "How long do you think this will last?" And it didn't last long. You come back, it takes a day or 2, 3 days, you're back to reality. You're back to the illusion of reality. But I never forget the experience, and I could reconnect it any given moment. And the grief is hard to explain. It's just a hole inside of you. I happen to be close to my father. I loved him. But I could see this with anyone, even if one is not so close. It has an impact. That's it. Sometimes it's an impact the other way. You wanted to beat up your parent, and now you can't anymore, whatever the reason is. And in my case, my father was a journalist, and he had a newspaper, and he was the publisher and the editor of it. And I was doing my work. I was working in Meaningful Life Center, the work I do now. I didn't have time for that. I never was involved. But I, for some reason, I could not see it just close down. Whatever, that's my nature. So I became the publisher, which I am till this day. Completely ridiculous, because I didn't have a second for it. So I hired people. But I'll tell you one thing. Clear as day. I took energy called grief and I turned it into that. I did it completely as a mitzvah. It was my tribute to my father. And I see with my own eyes. I know that it's doable. I wasn't even so conscious, but I see the energy of the grief was channeled directly. And I did things with such passion and commitment that made no sense, but I did it. And thank God it continues now. Good staff. It consumes a little part of me, but I was able to manage. But I've never in my life been able to figure out how I can do that. But so there's no question that any loss has a tremendous amount of energy. But you have to find something where you channel it. In this case, it was my father's memory. It was his life. I couldn't see myself just letting something die. It's bad enough that his body died. 35 years of his life. He built something that had value. It had a message. It was a voice. It was a media voice, etc. It's called allgemeiner.com if you want to check it out. A plug for it. And thank God, still challenging. It's not that easy, but great staff, young people, all in their 20s working on it. I'm just the guy that gets all the abuse, and all the honors haven't come yet, but whatever. You get the idea. But the point is that there's a channeling. So whether you feel you have a voice or you don't, there's energy inside of you. The energy may be a desperate cry, but that's also a voice. So my suggestion is you have to find something that speaks to your heart. In the Talmud it says, where should you begin studying? A student asks, he said, where your heart desires. Where your heart desires. It's like the ultimate validation of your heart, of your voice. Every one of you has something where your heart desires. I'm talking about something healthy. I should qualify this. Something that your heart desires, and if you can't find it, you have to find someone that will help you find it. And then commit to it. That's how you start getting your voice activated again. And if you got negative energy, so then do it with craziness. This Shabbos is Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat. It's a significant day in the world I come from, maybe the entire world. A day with the passing of the previous Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe that was my mentor and teacher, assumed leadership. And one of the discourse that he delivered on this day, on the Shabbos, the 10th of Shvat, called Basi Lagani, Return, Come to My Garden, and talks about this idea of healthy insanity and unhealthy insanity. And the key is to channel unhealthy insanity into healthy insanity. Okay? So I wish you all to become insane. I hope you understand what I mean. In other words, not to be limited by the rational calculations and all the fears and concerns, and just sometimes do something that's crazy, but healthy crazy. And it could be fueled by the unhealthy crazy. And that's the challenge that we all have. So, my friends, each of you has that unique voice. So you may not even know it, but some people around you may know it. And it's to find those type of people, the voice that is your birthright. No matter what happened to it, it's still there. And finding it and discovering it on this Shabbos of song is a tremendous gift. So if it's a commitment you make that at least this year you're going to find it, you will. And you just have to be persistent and patient, and as well as do some of the suggestions I made. And that is, again, you have to have someone to talk to about it, and you have to have some text to follow, and then resonance, and finally channeling the negative into the positive. So, to me, it's the greatest, what can I say, the greatest reward, the greatest gift is to be able to see people's voices sing. I just have deep pleasure when I see it. So I wish us all that we all should merit to see each other's true voice emerge. And it may not be what others like or they don't like. It doesn't have to be defiant. It doesn't have to be compliant. The key is that it's yours. And find somewhere to express it, and find people that will respect and cherish it. That's my blessing and wish to all of you. Okay, so to your voice, if I had a l'chaim, a toast to your voice. Thank you very much. Philip's class will be taking place tomorrow.
It says that an email will say where the class will be.
Okay, the email will say where the class will be, Philip. Yes, Philip is always meticulous. And, okay, everybody's voice shall resound in the streets and homes of this city. Everyone have a very good week. Until next, if you haven't left your email address, please do so we can stay in touch. I send out a weekly email thought. Be happy to send to you. And any other way we could be of help in your, let's call it your voice lessons, in discovering your voice, please don't hesitate to call upon us. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye.